Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. I did have a chance to eat some dinner. Thought about maybe a quick nap, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I decided not to do it. But good luck. More tennis. There's actually tennis happening right now. The WTA is in full swing, but we have a handful of ATP events we wanted to talk about, the ATP Cup and a few tournaments. But I think we'll start in Melbourne, Steve. What do you think?
Sounds good to me. I mean, they're all in Melbourne, but look, it's going to be a pretty busy little period, I think. Obviously, we're backing up a couple of hours later, so we'll jump straight in and I can pop up. Shall we just go straight into that first section of the draw?
Yeah, I'm ready if you guys are.
Perfect. All righty. So maybe if we just start from the top here, this is interesting in that we've got David Goffin as a top seed of a tournament. So looking at this particular section, we've got Goffin at the top with the bye. One of the young players to watch, I think, over the next years/decades. Carlos Alcaraz in that little pocket there. Damir Zumher, Federico Delbonis, Thiago Monteiro, and Vasek Pospisil. Not the strongest little section here, but is there anyone that stands out to you or what are your thoughts here, Candace, on this particular section?
Well, one, I was excited to see Alcaraz. I've heard so much about him. I haven't been able to see him a ton outside of the qualifiers that we just saw for the Australian Open. So really excited to be able to get a little bit more on him because there is such a hype about him. Still so very young, I think born in 2003. So excited to see what's to come from him. We do have Goffin there at the top, who I think is quite vulnerable, but obviously hard to defeat him or hard to get him beaten here right off the bat when you have the bye first. And then, as much as Alcaraz is a player for the future, I think Goffin should be able to handle him at this stage of his career. It makes it interesting for Pospisil. I think he's the one who I had making it through here, mostly because Goffin's one of those players, right, that he's very solid. You always know what you're going to get from him, which is not always the case at this time of the year in men or women's tennis. But what he is that player who beats most people, but against some of the guys with a little bit more power, he tends to struggle. So I look for Pospisil to take advantage and make his way through this section.
Yeah, I like that Pospisil play. Makes a lot of sense to me on these courts with his serve. He should do pretty well. And Goffin is also that kind of guy who might look at this and go, all right, I've got a bye in the first round. I got a second round warm-up match here. Awesome. Third round points. Let's pack it in and practice for the Australian Open. So I like Pospisil here too. I think he has a nice shot to make it through the section.
Yeah, and I completely agree here too. I think it is a pretty favourable draw for Pospisil to be able to try and find his range through that first round or two. I mean, Zumher could, he'd need to significantly lift his form from what we've seen from him recently. I guess the one question is, Goffin did make it was the semi-finals, wasn't it, in Antalya the other week before they came into quarantine. So it wasn't the worst performance, but it also wasn't particularly convincing. I think with Alex de Minaur beating him in that semi-final. Is there anything else for this particular section, or shall we pop on to the next part of the first quarter?
No, nothing else from me.
Me either.
All righty. Alex, do you want to run us through this little pocket of the draw?
We've got Basilashvili there at the bottom, Thompson at the top. Herbert in the middle there is kind of interesting. He might be able to serve his way into some contention here, but I think this is a nice spot for Thompson. Basilashvili is still kind of putting it together from a tennis perspective. Curious to see kind of what he has here, and I think, frankly, Thompson or even Herbert, if he's able to kind of sneak through here, kind of serve their way through that. So I think it's a nice spot for Thompson, though. I like the way everything kind of builds for him, and I think there's probably going to be some value here once the outright market's open. I think he's got a nice little section.
Yeah, look, I would tend to agree here. And I think, one of the advantages for Thompson is that he has been in Australia for an extended period of time. He's been training a lot with Nick Kyrgios, and he looks fit. And, it's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of continue on that momentum that he was able to gain towards the end of 2020. Home court advantage now, seeded draw, relatively favourable draw too. So I'd be looking to see if, I'd be hoping for his sake, and I think, looking on recent form as well, that he should be able to make a run through this section. And look, it's great to see Basilashvili win or technically make it to the second round of a tournament. Hasn't happened all that often recently, so nice to see him through there. But how about yourself, Candice? Is there anyone here that stands out?
For me, it was the same. It was Thompson. I thought that this was a really favorable section for him, just given his style and the lack thereof of form from some of the other people that are in his particular group. As you mentioned, good kind of rounding out of last year. And yeah, you guys kind of took the words from my mouth. So we're all on Thompson.
All righty. Well, I think that's... And I guess a question for both of you with this section then. So say we are all interested in Thompson getting through this little pocket. How do you like his matchup then against potentially Pospisil or Goffin? Do you think there's one that maybe favors him more so than the other?
I don't know. I mean, Goffin at this point, again, you got to worry about the motivational angle. I think, he's probably less worried about somebody like Pospisil. I mean, Goffin, if he's in that match, is probably the more talented player. So you probably have to lean that way, even though there's some maybe attitude question marks.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pospisil is less threatening overall as a player for Thompson. I think he's more likely to be there because you don't expect Goffin to be completely invested, as you guys have alluded to. But if Goffin were to go against him at that stage, I think to get there, he would have to beat Pospisil, which would be kind of that test of his will at this stage. So if he were to win that, then he's a little bit more dangerous because it indicates a little bit more that he's in it to win it. Yeah,
I think that's a pretty good summary there of that first quarter. Shall we move on to the second quarter? Mm-hmm. All righty, on we go. So leading out the top of this quarter, we have Hubert Hurkacz, who was coming off that Delray Beach title a couple of weeks ago before going into quarantine. We've got Torpgaard, Martinez Portero, Kopians, Robin Haas, the veteran there. Speaking of veterans, we can just round it out with another couple of veterans and Pablo Cuevas, who entertained everyone, I think, during the quarantine period with his various stories and TikToks, although Alex probably doesn't know what a TikTok is. And Pablo Andahar at the bottom there, who is seeded in a hardcore tournament.
Is TikTok what the kids are calling clocks these days? I assume that's what they see, the big round ones that actually make the sound. That's, we decided to take all actual words and turn them into tiny little sounds. So is that what the TikTok is?
For me, TikToks used to be a biscuit. So that's what they used to be here in Melbourne. But look, I'm learning. I'm trying to keep up with the youth of today. But anyway, if we look into this section, is there anyone outside of the name Hurkacz that stands out to either of you?
I don't mind Cuevas. I mean, you mentioned Andahar. Obviously, that's a favorable matchup to Cuevas given the surface that they're playing on here. After that, if he plays Kopians or Haase, I mean, I just don't think that that's particularly tough either. So I look at it to be Hurkacz against Cuevas. Hurkacz should win. But, this is a guy who's been around forever. I mean, there are a few matches in this first round that when I looked at it, I thought, whoa, is it 2020 or 2011? And this was one of them. But, at this time of the year, and again, we spoke about it a bit in our earlier podcast with the women, I'm finding myself over and over again in kind of these moments of uncertainty, relying on some of these veterans who, again, what you're going to get from him. I know what I'm going to get from Pablo Cuevas. Is that going to be enough to win the tournament? No. Is it enough to make a little run here and win, 2-3 matches? Yeah, sure.
It's tough. I mean, I like what you said there, Candice. He can sort of put something together here. It's really rough, though. It's got to be Hurkacz here for me in this section. Let's take a look at the bottom and see if maybe anybody might take him out there, because I don't see anybody here. We've got Sam Query there. We've got Public as well. Two guys, if they can sort of put it together, might be interesting. What do you think here, Steve?
Yeah, look, I'm interested from an Australian perspective. The name Christopher O'Connell there is one that I'm keen to see how he can return to form. I think he was one of the players who was most impacted by the COVID tour suspension in terms of that form. I think he won, over 80 matches in 2019, came into 2020 to start. Unfortunately, I think he got the wild card for the Australian Open and drew Andrei Rublev in the first round. Again, obviously, we had that break due to COVID, and I think he backed that up then by playing the US Open, where he won the first round and ended up against Medvedev in the second round. So he's just been receiving really terrible draws, basically. He did roll his ankle a couple of months ago in his last match of 2020. I think he had match point and rolled his ankle and had to retire. But he's had a couple of months off now and to kind of repair himself and recuperate. And I'd love to see him take advantage of here. Bublik, we saw him in the Antalya final. He was really impressive, I think, up until that final where he had to retire injured. I've done a really good job of trying to avoid talking about Sam Querrey, because last time I mentioned him, I picked him and he disappeared, which is true to form. It's true to form for Sam Querrey over the last 12 months. So
you're making up new ways to lose all the time.
Exactly. So look, I'd love to see O'Connell make a little bit of a run here, but if Bublik is fit, I think he's probably going to make his way out of this little section. I'm happy to look elsewhere than those top four names there of Querrey, Luxon, and Cabela's Baena and Travaglia in terms of looking at quarter winners and outright markets.
Yeah, what do you think here, Candace? Anything else you want to tack on?
No, just to kind of add to the confidence for Bublik, I suppose. I like him in this section. I like him to beat Hurkacz, though that'll be an interesting matchup. I believe they've only played each other once before, so you don't have a lot to go off of there. But I think Bublik could make it through this and then potentially could beat Hurkacz, kind of building on the recent form we've seen from him.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense here. Let's keep going. We've got the next quarter here. This is the top of the third. Kekmanovic. You've got Tennis Sandgren there. Some interesting names in the middle. Maybe Seppi, can be kind of fun. That'll be an interesting matchup with the Italians. We'll see what Sugu Kwan has at this point. I'd love to pick my boy Tennis, but this probably is Kekmanovic, even though he kind of had a rough start in his first event. What did you think here, Steve?
Yeah, look, I tend to agree. I would be fascinated and I'd love to get along if Kekmanovic plays Kwan in the second round. I think that would be quite an interesting matchup. I think Kwan was a little disappointing in Delray Beach, but I think he caught a very impressive quarter, I think, on his day there. JP Smith has it against him against Sandgren there, and look, Caruso versus Seppi is. Look, if it was 10 years ago, you'd probably give a little bit more weight to Seppi, and maybe even 5 years ago. But I don't think he's in that outright conversation anymore. So I'm happy to lean towards Kekmanovic because I know Sandgren hasn't done a lot of training recently, but he's done a lot of complaining. So see what unfolds there as he actually takes to the court.
What do you see here, Candace?
I am just so excited to see Sandgren play an Australian in Australia. That's the highlight of this section for me. I think Kekmanovic makes it through rather comfortably.
Yeah, I have to wonder if Sandgren's going to chug a Foster's, right, Steve?
I wouldn't even chug a Foster's. That's what you drink. We don't.
No. I heard that's what you got. That's all the documentaries I've seen my whole life. Those like little short 1 minute documentaries that are on TV randomly about Australia. They keep telling me that you guys like Foster's. That's what those are, right?
We like Foster's, and you can't see it on the screens when you're watching the tennis, but it's really hard to keep the kangaroos out of the court as well. So it does make it a little bit tricky.
That's good. At least you have the koala under control. As you look at the bottom half of this quarter, Sinner, Bednay, some fun names in here. Sinner, I think, a great candidate possibly to win this tournament. Exactly what you're looking for in a younger player in terms of talent, all the right motivation stuff. This draw sets up nicely for him here. What do you see here, Candace?
The player who I found really interesting when I dove into this section was Yatsuka Uchiyama, who, when I was looking into him, mostly plays in challenger tournaments. He obviously plays against Badin here to kick things off, but he seems like a player who could handle him. We know Badin, very good mover, tends to work well when he gets his opponents to be forced to move around. But from what I've seen from Uchiyama, he should be able to handle that well. He's a very fast player. And if he can make it through that first round match, things open up for him a little bit. I don't expect him by any stretch of the imagination, to make it all the way through. But I could see him making a little bit of a run. I'd be interested in going with Uchiyama match to match in this section.
And And look, for those who are watching along on the live stream, this looks like it's carried across some of the wrong information there. It's actually Dane Sweeney playing Ilya Ivashka. I was going to say it's a quick turnaround for Akira Santalan to fly back from Turkey yesterday and go through 14 days of quarantine. But I think another name that, along the lines of what Seppi, we're saying about Seppi in the last section, Yensun Liu is one player who seems to have really made the most of, the tour suspension and using his protected ranking. I think he used it for the Australian Open last year. He's barely played any tennis since having some significant shoulder injuries a couple of years ago. And I would say that without that protected ranking, he wouldn't be anywhere near Melbourne at the moment. So I wouldn't be going anywhere too close to him. But a player, similar to Uchiyama to keep an eye on is Alex Vukic, who does play Liu in that first round. He's starting to put together a decent body of form and tennis. And I think, we'll continue to see him rise up through the rankings. But I think it's all, this ultimately comes down to, I think, Yannick Sinner and how much he wants it, I think, this week. Obviously, there's no odds out when we're discussing these at the moment, but I think Sinner is one to is the one to pick here.
Yeah. Anything else, guys, here in this quarter before we move on to the last?
Happy to keep on moving on.
Riley Opelka has himself a bye, and a nice kind of start here to this tournament. As I look through, maybe Laszlo Djere will be there. I'm not sure if maybe the Australian wild card here will run through this tournament since he's actually gotten a chance to play some tennis. But this looks like a nice setup for Opelka. I think that this is kind of his section to lose. What do you see, Candace?
I see similar. Very comfortable up on this spot for him. I'm well off the Laszlo train after we tried to roll that way before. Yeah, we're not going there again. This looks fairly straightforward for Opelka.
And I'm just going to do a little bit of double checking here that wild card. There's been a lot of flipping around with the wild cards because I think actually we have. I think Savil's actually in the ATP Cup team, so I'll just double check that one just as we're going through. But look, Riley Opelka, I think I agree with this. That he should be too strong here unless he, lost his first serve in customs. I think. Any thoughts there, Alex?
Yeah, like Opelka, again, I think that this is a solid section for him. The only problem is this section has to play the winner of the section just below, who I expect to be, if he's really focused and paying attention, and hasn't really shown signs of being the kind of guy that quits, even if there's the Grand Slam here, is in Khachanov, who's had a lot of success, frankly, against some of the taller players. I know that Opelka's game maybe is a little more dynamic than somebody like Isner's, but Khachanov's beaten Isner twice. Looking back through here, some of the other taller players did lose to Raonic recently. I'm trying to see some other wins here, but looks like Tennis Abstract. I can only go 6'4" or taller, so I can't get all the total trees. But Khachanov hasn't struggled against this. So he's, it's a question of attitude. I think he probably try well. So as much as I like this spot for Riley, this would be a nice tournament for him to kind of steal before the Open. But maybe Khachanov gives it his all. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think a player to watch here from an unseeded standpoint, I'm fascinated to see how Kevin Anderson comes back. I think, we saw that he was struggling this time last year with injury. I think the break came at a good time for him, but then obviously coming back, he was that little bit rusty as well. So I'm interested to see what level he can get back to. Battle of the veterans with Feliciano Lopez in this first round, but it really opens up, that second round against, Stave or Dalian is a pretty nice ATP level second round when we're looking at things overall. And just to go back to that last little section that we were discussing, so it's Tristan Schoolkate that's come in as that wild card instead of Luke Saville. So Schoolkate was he's the young Australian who actually had match point against Bernard Tomic in the Australian Open qualifying the other week, but couldn't finish off that match. So, he is one to watch here and would be looking to take advantage of that little wild card opportunity here. But look, as you said, Khachanov, I think, it's his to, if he brings a level close to his best, and you would have to think that he is going to be pretty motivated here as opposed to being in that ATP Cup team. I think this is a good spot for him to try and take advantage of a draw, which doesn't always end well when you're talking about Karen, but it's his. I don't see any position here early days that he's going to be an underdog in any capacity.
Yeah, that top match actually. That's funny. I just realized Lopez and Anderson. I was curious. I wonder if that's going to be one of the older matches ever played. 73 years between the two of them. That might be the oldest match ever that doesn't involve Ivo Karlovic.
I was going to say, Cuevas versus Andahar wouldn't be too far behind, would it?
No.
Ooh, let me double check that while Candace gives us her take.
I'm much in line with Steve. I like Kevin Anderson in this section quite a bit. Many of the reasons that he said, we saw that physically he was having a really hard time at the end of last year. So the time away was perfect. I think he needed it. Obviously, given his game, there are just a few less things you got to get together when you come back off a layoff. As long as the serve is rolling, then you're okay. So, it helps him. I think that he has someone in Feliciano Lopez who he knows well and has always really handled fairly comfortably there to start. Then a pretty facile match if he's able to make it through that, so that if it was him against Kachanov, he's had a couple of matches under his belt by that stage. I believe he beat Kachanov the only time they faced each other. It was a couple of years ago in Miami. But I like Anderson quite a bit. Very interesting in this portion. Him against Opelka, I would think Opelka should be able to win that. But nevertheless, a fun kind of bottom half that we have here in the tournament.
It'd be nice to see Kevin Anderson find some form and start to play well. He is a fun player and not as old as I thought. So, Steve, to get back to your question, Feliciano Lopez is 39. Kevin Anderson is 34. Put them together, you get 73. Give me a guess. What do you think the combined age of Cuevas and Andahar is?
Oh, my gosh.
73.
What do you think, Candace?
78.
I like Steve's game theory there, by the way. I like that you hit the nail right on that at 35. But it's actually 70. Andahar is only 35, and Cuevas is only 35. So Feliciano Lopez at 39, very much the elder statesman of that group. But that's kind of fun. Yeah, it'll be an interesting match. Again, let's hope that Kevin Anderson can kind of get himself into some form, but I'm certainly not going to bet on it. I mean, it sounds like you guys are optimistic, but not maybe investing.
Feliciano is 39 with the social media game of like a 18-year-old.
Well, that's, handsome guy, has got a lot of money.
He'll be out there. He's going to be like 60 out there, like modeling, looking better
very
than all
well.
of us.
I'm sure that he has had a lot of nice lotion in his life and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Got great hair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the best.
Tremendous hair. When you think about 39-year-old hair, like that's good job, buddy. All right, I think now that we've covered all the important angles, anything else from you guys here on the draw before we jump into some of our kind of picks and attempts to find value? Even though, again, folks, we don't have odds, but we're trying to do our best here to maybe pick our winner and then kind of an underdog.
No, I'm all good. I'm ready to head into it. Do you want to lead us off, Alex, with your main pick for the tournament?
Yeah, sure. We'll jump in here and kind of hit it as we were talking. I think this sets up really nice for Jannik Sinner. As you start to go back and look at these tournaments that are before majors, every once in a while you will see a big player win something like this. Ash Barty in the WTA did it, I think, 2019 or something. She kind of sabotaged her Australian Open by winning Adelaide or something goofy like that. But a player like Jannik Sinner here who, is thinking about an Australian Open and doing his best, but has a chance here, I think, maybe to steal some nice points to get his season started with a championship. You look at his draw, it's pretty fantastic. He has all the talent in the world here. So he's actually my pick to win this event.
Well, I may as well just follow on from that because I've got the exact same pick as you. So I've also gone for Sinner. I think, again, he's kind of sitting on that bubble at the moment in terms of seeding for the Australian Open. I think this is a really important little week for him because I think, if he has a good week here, I don't see him falling out of really the top 30 unless there's an injury for a very, very long time. So, look, it's a favourable draw for him. And I think, also didn't look fantastic in the exhibition against the Krajinovic versus Djokovic hybrid double blister combination or whatever it was the other day in Adelaide. I think I'm assuming that he'll probably go up as one of the favourites here, one of the top 2 or 3. So there won't be too much value in him price-wise, but I think when you look at that draw and what he's capable of, he's still young enough to be able to kind of handle the situation and not fatigue himself too much before the Australian Open next week.
Love it.
you have to go for someone else. We can't all agree. I don't think very rarely do we all agree on something. So who
I don't know,
have
have
you
we
gone
ever all agreed? I don't know if we've ever
Yet to have an
agreed.
agreement when it was all three of us. When it was Steve and I, we just copied each other's picks the last time, frankly, for that little challenger thing we did. So Steve and I continue to pick the same people. Dennis. But Candace hopefully has a different perspective.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Kikmanovic in this tournament. Obviously, I'd like it better if it was on clay, but nevertheless, I think he found himself a pretty soft pocket here in the draw to at least make a little bit of a run. We'll see how it can go from there, certainly, but in a tournament that seems to have a fair bit of potential for chaos early with a couple of wide open portions, I think he's found himself in a little bit of a sweet spot there. Honorable mention to Uchiyama, who I said before I'll be really looking to early on match to match, because I do think he's interesting in a very similar portion of the draw as well.
Alrighty, and we've all made what we would perceive to be a value selection is that, it's not going to be someone who's favourite, particularly in their quarter, so it should be, looking at longer odds in terms of the outright markets. Alex, who have you gone for as your value pick for Melbourne 1?
As I start to look at that, as you start to look at that first quarter, I think there is a lot of value kind of going against people that are in golf and section. I think this sets up really nicely for Pospisil, a guy who has the serve and kind of the game to make his way through this tournament. As you start to look at his draw here, again, if he's able to find a little bit of form right away, get his serve in some kind of functional manner, he has a great chance to kind of push his way through this draw. Maybe he sees Goffin there, maybe he doesn't, but I just think it's kind of a nice spot here. And as much as I like Jordan Thompson there in the bottom section, I think Pospisil wins that match. He's playing the winner of the second quarter, who we talked about. Maybe Herkaz, maybe Bublik, but no one that I think we're really too worried about there. So I'm going to probably grab Pospisil if it's a nice number, and I think we'll have a chance to do that.
That sounds more than fair. Now, we haven't agreed this time, which is a nice welcome change. So I've actually gone for, and it may have kind of become clear when we were talking through the section. So my value pick is Jordan Thompson. So I've gone for the Australian flavour, Shakira. He hasn't had to deal with the quarantine. It looks like he's been training really well from the snippets and clips that I've seen with him and Kyrgios. He did obviously end the year quite well. And look, maybe if it was a full crowd, sometimes the pressure can get to him a little bit at home. There's not going to be too much of a crowd. I think this week it's going to be that 30 to 50% capacity. I think he's a really good chance here, I think, to make a little bit of a run with a favourable draw to start. And look, he shouldn't be, I wouldn't imagine him being too short in the betting, looking at some of the other names that we have here. How about you, Candace?
I'm going the same. I like Jordan Thompson for my value. I'm sure I won't be too far off of maybe the price I'm going to have for my win selection overall. But, we mentioned it much before we went through the draw. A very nice portion of the draw for him, given his style. Even if he goes against Pospisil, he beat him in the only time they played each other a couple of years ago in China. And it was a pretty, it was a back and forth match, but one that he was comfortable enough in all the way through. So I look for him. I think this is a fun tournament from a betting perspective. I think you have more options in this one, whether you're looking to go match to match or outright, at least maybe in some of the women's tournaments we talked about earlier today.
Love it.
I say that, though, in front of Alex.
It's fine.
He'll deal with it.
Just gonna let it roll off my shoulders, but if you want to point it out, it's fine.
All righty.
Anything else, guys, on Great Ocean Road, which honestly sounds like a lovely golf course on the coast there. You're playing, you look out, you see people in their boats scuba diving in the Great, Barrier Reef and stuff, but it's a tennis tournament.
It's not quite that, but that's points for effort. I think that's all. Shall we move on to the Murray River Open?
Yes, it would be the kind of maybe north course that lined up with Great Ocean Road. You have Great Ocean Road that puts it there right by the beach, and then Murray River's on the other side. It's like a tributary that runs into the ocean. You have like the river course and the ocean course kind of thing. But no, this is tennis. In fact, let's start, I guess, at the top of the draw. What a good place to start. I'd actually, one of these days, I'm going to say let's start at the bottom and really throw Steve for a loop. But Stan Wawrinka here in the top of the first section. Gasquet, a few Australians there in the middle, Steve. We've liked to pick them, and I've had a little success in the WTA tournaments so far with them. Do you expect that to carry over into some of these ATP events, kind of that Australian advantage of not having to quarantine so strictly?
Potentially. Obviously, there's the disadvantage of being lower ranked players. So I think it's going to depend on particular situations, but neither of these two travelled over to Doha to participate in qualifying. So they should both be fresh. Alex Bolt seems to find an extra level or two when he plays here in Melbourne. I think he lost in 5 sets to Dominic Thiem last year, who went on to obviously make the final of the Australian Open. Tanazi Kokkinakis has had injury trouble after illness, after injury trouble. So it's just nice to see him back on court. And speaking of illness or issues in terms of health recently, I think it came out yesterday or the day before that Stan Wawrinka actually was positive for COVID a couple of weeks ago and is still kind of on his way to recovery, trying to build up his fitness base again. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks. That bye in the first round will help him a little bit, but it sounds like he's kind of asking and wanting a little bit of time on court before we end up playing best of 5 tennis in a week's time.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Hopefully Stan gets himself together. But this could be a nice warm-up, like you said. What do you see here, Candace?
Yeah, I mean, Stan obviously vulnerable for the reasons that you suggested. Kukushkin, the type of player who in the past has troubled him a little bit anyway, just with the big serve. I look to him to make his way through this section, to be honest. Kukushkin, that is. This is a player who, I mean, as we know, has the case with many of these guys, the talent is there, inconsistent, and at this stage, probably not as good as he once was. But nevertheless, if Wawrinka is vulnerable, then he's not sitting here, really playing anybody too difficult unless you think that it ends up being Kokkinakis against him. And even that match, I think, should favor Kukushkin. So I'm going that direction.
Kukushkin, indeed. What do we got here in the bottom section of the top quarter? Obviously, again, it could be tough for Wawrinka, so there might be a little more opportunity here. We see Taylor Fritz. Marin Cilic is the 11th seed. It's kind of a precipitous drop for him, isn't it? What do you see here, Candace? How does this section look to you?
I actually quite like Gilles Simon to make his way through this portion. What people don't know behind the scenes, we have like a spreadsheet where we keep all of our picks that we end up doing for the outrights for these tournaments. And for about 45 minutes, my pick was for value was Gilles Simon. I ended up swapping it out late, so watch him make the semis just now that I say it to destroy me. But he's that kind of guy that I'm looking for, right? He's the veteran. He's been around. We know what to expect from him. He's not the world beater, but you can always expect him to be fit, and he's always going to make guys work. And at this time of the year, and especially this year more than any, it's not a bad trait to have.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. What do you see here, Steve?
Yeah, I think, and this kind of flows on a bit from what we were talking about in episode 5, covering off the women's tournaments. If you're looking for outright picks here, ideally that player has a relatively comfortable start to the tournament. And, looking at Cilic, he's got Jeremy Chardy, who, played pretty well in Antalya. I think it was the tournament that he took part in before the quarantine period. So that's a tricky little matchup there at the start. But Cilic kind of falls into that Kevin Anderson category of, I'm just curious to see what level he can get back to. He seemed pretty optimistic at the end of last year that he could get back to a level near his best. Haven't seen it yet, but it'll be interesting to see what level he can get to. But I think looking at the question marks I have over Cilic, and the question marks in that top portion there, that I do like Taylor Fritz here, and looking to a more longer term, it's a pretty favorable first round match against Correa or Albot. If he brings a level close to his best, he's going to be tricky here. And, thinking about that top section, best player, he could come up against his Stan. It's not the worst draw for him to kick off the year.
I like this spot for Fritz too, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it sets up really nicely for him. And, again, as I mentioned kind of here at the top, it's a shame we're not talking about Cilic at all. Hopefully he sort of finds what he once had, but It sounds like none of us are expecting that. As much as that's a bummer, let's move on to the third quarter. George there at the top of the section, Kyrgios there at the bottom of the section. What do you think, Steve? How much money should we bet on Nick Kyrgios to win this tournament? Clearly, he's had all the time in the world to get locked in and focused and be playing a lot of tennis. These courts are fast. He should have some fans there cheering for him. You're going to be there cheering for him, right?
Yeah, potentially.
Much to the demise of Yulia Putintseva.
Yeah, I do. Actually, that reminds me, I need to print off my sign for her.
I to tag her in all your pictures.
Yeah, I will. I think she got released from jail last week, so it's good that she's out there and being able to actually play. So I hope she's enjoying that fresh air. I'm conflicted with Kyrgios because about 2 months ago, I actually bet on Kyrgios to win the Australian Open at 100-1. So I don't want him to do too much this week, but I also don't want him to do nothing. It's a bit of a funny draw for him because if he gets through Muller in that first round, he might play Tomic, who Kyrgios just absolutely got stuck into Tomic's girlfriend on social media last week about her behavior in quarantine. And then potentially we'll face Coric in the third round, who he called a potato last year. So it's hard to, and that's just to get out of this eighth, let alone the rest.
Is that an insult, by the way?
I don't know. I think so. That's
what I liked about it. I'm still not sure.
Yeah, I think it's worse than Pelican, but I'm not sure. Like, he kind of uses different names. I haven't seen a ranking scale yet, but maybe that's something we need to create.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Look,
Do you
Kyrgios
think
is
George was Irish? Anyway,
I think he's obviously said a lot over the last 9 months, and he hasn't been able to, I think he's got a lot of people on side over the last 9 months, but normally he gets people offside with his behavior on court, and he just hasn't been on court, so there hasn't been that opportunity. Kyrgios is one of those players, and when you look at his record against a lot of the top players, if he plays his absolute best, he can match it with anyone on the tour. It's just a question of whether we will see that. He's not playing, he didn't make the top two in terms of the rankings for the ATP Cup singles section of the team, so he's gone to play the ATP tournament. It's a favorable draw, but it's again question marks. I'm fascinated to see what books open up in terms of the odds for him to win this tournament. But like I said before, I'd be happy for him to kind of put in a decent effort, play a couple of matches, and then kind of rest up and prepare for the fortnight ahead. But Tomic versus Polman will also be an interesting one there. From an Australian standpoint, and nice to see one of them will actually get a win. I should have brought my Legionnaires hat as a Polman supporter. I might have to take that in tomorrow if they're playing on one of the courts that I'm able to get into.
He's going to need it. I think you can do it for him. I mean, it'll be big. I know, kind of taking a stand there. I mean, I guess if you're going to be there and there's a crowd, I mean, do you expect the crowd to go one way or the other here?
Yes, there's an Australian flag next to Tomic, but it's not gonna make too much of a difference, I think, with the crowd. He's put a lot of people offside over the years, so they'd be heavily in Polman's corner, I would imagine.
Well, maybe that'll help. Anything else to add here before we jump into the next section?
I've never anticipated, I said it last year, I think I tweeted at one point, I said in 2020, I never expected my pandemic hero to be Nick Kyrgios, but here we are.
Mm-hmm. He did it. He somehow did it.
Another name on him. Come on. It's going to be fun. You won't regret it.
Maybe not. Maybe not a player to think about from an outright perspective in this type of tournament, but keep an eye on Emil Rusevori over the course of the year, particularly when we move to the indoor hard courts. He's certainly going to continue his rise up the rankings.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good name to circle match to match. We'll see what he can do against George. That should be fun. Mana Rhino, Daniel Evans, some fun brash players there. I don't know, not too many interesting names there in the middle. That Lee 2 guy, I hear he's pretty good on something that's called the UTR Tour. One of our friends is thinking of getting him tattooed, I think.
Hopefully. Yeah. I don't know if Zampa's out there watching it all, but look, it's nice to see. Obviously, he didn't get a wild card into the Australian Open, but it's nice to see them give him an opportunity here. And look, if you had to pick a player to play against on hard court as your first ATP level match, Pedro Sousa's not the worst. I'd be pretty happy with that in terms of when you look at the rest of the players in the draw.
Makes sense to me. What do you see here, Candace? I mean, does anybody stick out to you? Who do you see taking down this section?
I just think it's Dan Evans' section for the taking. It's kind of boring, to be honest.
It isn't the best section. I mean, the Evans Manarino match could be kind of fun. Again, two kind of brash, headstrong guys just kind of smashing the ball back and forth at each other. That's always kind of fun for me. Steve, and maybe a more serious take. I mean, who do you see coming out of here?
I think, Mikhail Ymer played pretty well here last year. I think he ended up losing in a match tiebreak to Kashanov in the Australian Open. He's one to kind of keep an eye on, but I don't think Manarino is a great matchup for him here. Giron versus Mo is two Americans that need a win, and it's nice to see that one of them will get a win. But I'd be looking at Dan Evans, I think, as the safest pick to get out of this little portion of the draw. But I'd love to see Li Tu knock off Sousa in the first round.
Fingers crossed, folks. Let's jump down to the next section, where we've got Casper Ruud, who's unfortunately not playing on clay, Sonego, and Steve's favorite player, Nagal. Are you excited to see Nagal play here and not in the ATP Cup?
I am very excited to see him play. Hopefully he's on the order of play tomorrow so I can pop down and cheer him on a little bit, but I certainly won't be making any tweets about that because I would rather not be threatened again. So I think I'll keep it.
People didn't. The joke's not as funny to everybody else.
Yeah, I'll keep it light for the people that can read. So that's probably my plan of attack for the next couple of weeks. Casper Ruud's a funny one because obviously his best surface is clay, but I think he generates the most topspin I think of any of the top players, and it's not the worst on these courts. It is a relatively friendly little section here. But I'm keen to see. Jason Kubler was really disappointing in the Australian Open qualifying when he lost to Stakhovsky. I think he was 5-1 up in the first set and lost it straight. So, look, I'm interested to see how this little section pans out.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, Candace, what sticks out to you here? Any names that you can see take the section? This is a tough one for me. I guess Ruud probably does take it simply because he has a bye. He seems like the best player, but I'm inclined to want to bet against him. How about you?
I am against him. I like Berankis in the section. I think Nagal's very winnable. And then, the winner, whether it's Sonego or Kubler, is winnable as well. So I'd look for it to be him and Ruud. That one's tricky, right? Because Berankis has handled Ruud on hard court in the past, but Ruud's ascension has all happened since then. So you'd anticipate that it should be a closer match than we've seen from them in the past. But I mean, again, I'm going to the same formula. Like, okay, I didn't put Gilles Simon as my value. I put Berankis, who, same idea. Old, veteran, been around the block. I know what I'm going to get from him. And I think he's in a spot where the matchups are very winnable.
Yeah, I don't hate it. It's a good name there. Any other thoughts on this section? Are we ready to jump down and see who they'll play to take the quarter?
No, just let's go Nagal. Sorry, Candace.
I want a goal now because every time that I give my picks, Alex is like, that makes sense. Or like, he's like, I don't hate it. I want to give one where he's just like, no. That's my life
every
goal.
Once in a while. I just, you're doing a good job. I'm sorry. Do you want me to just be arbitrarily mean to you and tell you I don't like stuff when I like it? I don't.
To be fair,
that doesn't sound like me.
To be fair, last episode we didn't really think that Flipkins made sense. So,
well,
I let it go. It was a nice run.
Yeah.
If you didn't hear the WTA, Candace does just a spectacular, probably 30 to 45 seconds on Kirsten Flipkins, who was announced out of the tournament. I don't know, maybe 30 minutes before we started. But let's move forward. Let's move on. We're here again to talk about the men. FAA has just a nice setup here. He's got a bye. No one really that I can see him giving too much trouble. I mean, Fucsovic, he's okay, but this is maybe a little out of his league. This could be a nice early season beginning kind of run for FAA. Candace, what do you see here? And I just want you to know that I hate it already.
I saw it coming down to Fucsovics and Felix. I went with Fucsovics, and that's probably why I ended up with Berankis as far into this tournament as I did, because the notion of him playing Felix is a very different story. But either way, I think that those are the two that you're dealing with in this spot.
That's good. I actually do really think you're wrong there. I love this for FAA. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I like it for FAA as well, but I'm fascinated by, and it's probably one of the better first-round matches across the tournaments, is the Lloyd Harris versus Yerasimov. It's going to be a big serving match, a lot of big hitting. Lloyd Harris showed this time last year that he can play well in the Australian conditions. I think he made the Adelaide final. So, look, he is one to keep an eye on, and I wrote about him the other day as one of the young players to kind of keep an eye on this year. He's progressively, he's gradually improving. He's not, turning it on and making significant jumps in the ranking, but he's progressively getting better every year. So I think he's one to keep an eye on. But look, if Felix wants it, I think Felix can have this. Similar to Khachanov, it would have been the third singles option for Canada on the ATP Cup. This looks like a more favourable option to try and earn some more ranking points.
No, I agree with that. Any other thoughts, guys, on the third quarter before we jump into the top section of the fourth?
On we go.
Hugo Humbert is at the top. We've got Arv there at the bottom. Mute is there. Francis Tiafoe. Love Francis Tiafoe. It's an interesting section. Tiafoe, again, very talented. I wonder what he can do here, but looks like a nice setup for Humbert, especially with the bye and kind of the easy second match there, or what will be his first matchup. Steve, what do you see here?
I see a funny little patch here. Look, I've been caught out a couple of times, I think, supporting or opposing Humbert. I just seem to struggle to get a read on him at times. Along the flavour of a lot of the other Australians, it's a big opportunity for James Duckworth to really cement himself in the top 100. He's kind of on that bubble at the moment, and he'd want to make the most of the next couple of months of hardcore tennis. Tiafoe is kind of that floater that when you look at some of the other players that are in this draw and they're in this draw and seeded, it's really he must be. Something needs to give him the kick to actually deliver it on a consistent level, to what we've seen of him, what we know is his best. This is a great opportunity for him to take a couple of scalps. But if we're looking at, I'd rather say Humbert and have him lose than completely write him off here and have him come through and win. Because I think, he showed down in, I think it was New Zealand, was it Auckland he won last year to start the year, and he looked pretty good. He's obviously got the bye to start and a pretty favourable second round matchup. But look, I'd like to see Tiafoe. I think it'd be good for the men's game and for the US tennis. That they're crying out for that name to kind of step up and take a little bit more responsibility, I guess, out of those younger names. And Tiafoe is one that stands out for me.
Just anybody, young, old, middle-aged, I don't care, male, female, just like to have a really great U.S. tennis player. Maybe someday. What do you think, Candace? Not about that, about this section. We're not going to get into that giant conversation. I don't have time. It's past my bedtime.
I agree. The bottom is open for Tiafoe. He's always a difficult one for me to get behind, just maybe because I'm American. And so our coverage centers on the Americans. And I've seen too many matches where you could just tell mentally and emotionally he wasn't invested. I went with Humbert here. I think he's kind of the smart play, I suppose. It seems like it's really going to pan out for him. I don't even think he needs to play his best tennis to make it through this section, to be frank.
Yeah, I do too. And, don't feel bad. It's not about you being an American. Just anyone that's seen that much Tiafoe knows that he's just is all the talent in the world. He reaches into his bag of tricks every once in a while and does this stuff where it's like, oh my God. And then he goes back to like that stupid limp thing he kind of does. The first time I ever saw him play, I kept messaging all my friends, like, is Tiafoe hurt? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, he's limping. I'm like, he's not limping. Like, what do you mean he's not limping? Like, that's how he walks.
Sometimes to conserve energy, you just don't lift your feet and you just mope around between points. It's
It's like a scuffle.
Looks like he's like guarding a back injury all the time or something. Like he's
Yeah.
like trying to do everything he can to like walk a certain way. Like it's anyway. He's very goofy. I hope he does very well. Tommy Paul, another American that maybe he'll be good someday. Probably not, but who knows? Dimitrov there at the bottom. We'll continue the disappointment train, frankly, with him. And then hey. Another couple Australians there in the middle. These ones are kind of interesting. I know Papier has been kind of hot on some of those smaller tours. I mean, Steve, do you think either him or Harris have the game here to make a run?
I think Harris would be limited to second round at best. I mean, Tara Daniel got in here as a lucky loser into the Australian Open, and as a reward for that, he's got a spot here as well in this draw. Now, I'd like to see Harris maybe perform a little better than he did in the AO qualifying when he lost to, I think it was Hugo Dalian. In a couple of tight sets there. Popyrin's the interesting one. I'm not really sure where he's at in terms of his game. He didn't have he didn't make it into the main draw of the Australian Open and then didn't attend qualifying. So I'm assuming he knew well before everyone else did that he had a wild card for the Australian Open. So he's a bit of an unknown, I think, for this week. I'm more fascinated to that match at the top, that Tommy Paul versus Cam Norrie match, I think, kind of set up this little section. I know Tommy Paul, I think, beat Dimitrov at the Australian Open last year in 5 sets, which is about 2 sets longer than I thought Tommy Paul's endurance lasted. But, it's a tricky first-round match against Cam Norrie as well. So, look, Dimitrov, you got the advantage in this little section that he has the bye to start, but, whoever wins that top match between Paul and Norrie could make a little run as well.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Paul and Norrie, honestly, are guys you'd probably like in some of these tournaments, but, again, the draw messes with us by putting them together. What a bummer. Candace, what are you seeing here?
I ultimately have Dimitrov making his way through, but I agree that I'm very intrigued by the Paul Norrie match. To be honest, looking at it, there's very little between them in that match. I would side Norrie just because we obviously saw the form fairly recently in Delray Beach. I thought he played really well there. So I would lean to him with kind of a bit of a momentum on his side, but I think ultimately Dimitrov will see this one through.
Yeah, I think, again, if you're kind of filling out a bracket the way we think about it, you probably have to pick Dimitrov here. But if you are doing a contest with your friends for this tournament, it might not be bad to kind of pick who you think the winner of Paul Norrie is kind of a game theory way to make sure yours stick out. All right, I think that just about wraps up the draw there for Melbourne 2. I got to double check. Murray River. That's right. Steve, do you know who Murray was?
Well, this is named after the river that's a little bit further north from here.
Not don't know who they named the river after, though.
Oh, not off the top of my head. I probably should know.
I hope his name was Murray, but it probably wasn't.
No, I think it's named after. Well, I thought Andy Murray would be a chance this week, but I think he's a bit like Flipkins that isn't playing, so that's disappointing.
No.
You guys like Andy Murray that much? Jesus. We'll just refer to it. I like it. We'll call it the Andy Murray River Open for the rest of the week, or for the rest of the show, frankly. So we got nothing else here for the draw. Let's go through and talk about who we kind of think wins. And again, we don't have outrights yet, but who we're expecting to hopefully be a value pick. I wonder if Steve and I copied each other again.
Couldn't possibly. I'm going to go first, and if you have copied me, then you've copied me. So I've gone with Felix. As I said before, he's one of those players that isn't, he's bypassed the ATP Cup, didn't want to be the third string player to play the doubles and backup singles. I think he's got a favourable draw. He started the year really well last year. I think he played Adelaide and made the semis. I think this is a good spot for him to try and take advantage of a draw and really boost his confidence overall. Now, you couldn't have possibly picked Felix, could you, Alex?
I picked FAA. I don't know if he's the same player. You seem to have spelled it. Is that what that stands for? Oh, shoot. We did it again, didn't we? It's a great draw. He's a fantastic player. As I start to look at this field, he's one of the most, if not the most talented player here, knowing what we know about Wawrinka and kind of his form. This is... If he is going to become the kind of player I think that we expect him to become, this is a tournament he should be succeeding in. This is a spot that he should be having a nice long run. Similar to kind of what we said about Sinner in the last tournament, this is a spot where he needs to kind of step up, make a run, beat some of these guys, and kind of make a nice first step forward in the season.
Yeah, that seems... Well, look, I tend to agree because I've gone with the same player. Now, again, all three of us can't be the same. Candace, who have you gone for?
I'm on the show just for variety. I'm just throwing like crazy stuff out there. So I have to be a little bit of variety. Not a very different portion of the draw from you guys, but for me, wait, are we doing winner or value?
Just winner.
Winner
first. Okay, so for me, I went with Dimitrov. I think that the bottom portion is much easier for him because I don't really want to mess with Kyrgios up there towards the top. I don't know what to expect from Kyrgios. I just think he's the most talented player in the field. So I'm trying to stay as far away from that as I can with Dimitrov, which is terrifying because when we talk about players and motivation, Dimitrov usually isn't at the top of my list. So this could be regrettable, but we're going to go on talent and hope it sees us through.
This could be regrettable. About betting on Dimitrov for the last 2 years.
I feel like I need to add him into my resolution around Mertens and Svitolina in the women's.
Yeah, I might. Hey, we could have like a group.
Exactly. We just need to.
It's a big part of tennis handicapping. It's odd.
Yeah.
I feel like more than any other sport, people have their list of people they just don't bet on or against. Mine very much notably being Kiki Bertens. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've gone back and checked, but I did. I literally went back through my bet log, added them all up, and it was like 1 or 2 and something betting on or against Kiki Bertens. It's amazing.
Yeah. We just need to make an outright intervention group, I think, and we can all. Yeah. It'll be a safe space where everyone can talk about all the regret. Now,
ironically, mine right when I could like first bet. This is how long we were talking about old players. Right when I could first bet, and so I'd play majors. Feliciano Lopez at Wimbledon every year. No dice.
It's the hair, isn't it?
The hair and the serve. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She perked up when I mentioned the hair earlier.
Yeah. Yep. All right. We'll start off with you, Alex, for a value pick. So again, odds aren't available here. So we've tried to kind of take a step out and not pick, the top seed in any particular section. Someone who we think might be a little bit more value. And we have tried to kind of pick different players where we can. Alex, who have you picked?
Well, sometimes value comes down to actual efficiency in the marketplace, and other times value is what you perceive, The price of something is what you're willing to pay for it, which is why I definitely picked Nick Kyrgios and not the same person Steve picked here. In all seriousness, I did pick Taylor Fritz. This is a great spot for Taylor Fritz. I think he has a chance to take Wawrinka out here if he even makes it there. Just a lot of value on him. I like the draw. So again, if he makes it through Wawrinka, he gets the winner of the second quarter, which might be Nick Kyrgios. And again, I'll be betting on him for fun, but not for seriousness. And yeah, I'm going to bet Taylor Fritz. And I think I kind of ruined Steve's pick.
I'll keep
something different here.
I'll keep it short and sharp. So I've gone for Taylor Fritz as well. Same section as Stan. Like you just said, I'm not going to rehash over it. So we'll just keep moving on. Have you come up with someone a little bit more interesting, Candace?
All I'm here is for interesting, apparently. I alluded to it earlier, but I like Ricardo Berankis for my value play in this group. I think, if the toughest player that you're playing on the hard court is Casper Ruud, that's not a bad deal as far as your draw goes. We'll see if he ends up going up against Fucsovics or Felix after that, if you were to see it through. But heck, if you made it that far, I'm a happy camper. So we're looking at Berankis. I know we mentioned all of these things as outrights, but match to match, she's fairly interesting as well.
Love it. All right, I think that wraps up everything for those ATP tournaments. Sorry, Steve, go ahead. Did you have something you wanted to add on?
No, I think we can roll into the final tournament.
That's right. We have another tournament, and it's not quite a normal tournament, of course. We don't have a bracket. I'm curious to see what Steve has put together here. We have the ATP Cup, or what I'm calling Melbourne 3.
Oh my gosh, we need like flags, like boop, boop.
I haven't gone with
I would have a flag, but Candace and I's team is not present.
No.
I assume we were busy and couldn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
Look,
we're too good for this tournament. Come on.
We violated some sort of COVID protocol or something.
Look,
this is part of the Sam Querrey punishment.
I mean, I could be mean and say that you guys just didn't have a high enough ranked player to get into it, but Australia's only in because we have a wild card. So it's I can't really say too much there. But
Actually, how it works, that's so depressing.
yeah. So if we had got in, maybe we would have given you guys a wild card. Probably not, though.
That's good. Had Alex as our wild card.
Now, this tournament, so it's going to run a little bit differently to how it ran in 2020. So 2020, we had 24 teams, I think, and it ran over a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. So this time it's compacted down into 5 days. So it'll run from Tuesday till Saturday, Australian time. And what we have is basically 4 groups of 3 countries. And the winning, so each country will play 2 ties, and they will then have a winner from each group move forward to the semi-finals. Now, I've searched long and hard through the ATP Cup website. I don't know who plays who in the semi-finals, and that is very unlike tennis to not have something clear. So basically, the key thing is when you're trying to look at this and try and figuring out a matchup, you need preferably your team or your country to win both of your group stage matches relatively, and to win it quite well. So there is obviously the option of a 1-1-1 split, which would come down to kind of differential in sets, in terms of rubbers. And, so that's why it's going to be important, I think, for these teams to try hard in doubles, because to be able to get that extra rubber, but also keep in mind that there's no week break before the Australian Open this year. So we have players who may not want to play multiple matches per day so close to the Australian Open. And I think that the big thing that came out of the ATP Cup last year was Alex de Minaur actually injured himself to the point of missing a couple of months, I think it was, of tennis. And he only just came back before that COVID break. So what I might do is I've just popped up under the screen here. So we'll just go through each particular group. So we've got effectively 2 to 3 singles players, and then there's kind of that hybrid. That third's either a good singles backup who can play doubles, and some have they've just stuck with doubles specialists. So shall we run through the teams there, Alex?
Yeah, Serbia, we've got Djokovic here, obviously, one of the best, if not the best players in the whole tournament here. Dusan Lajovic. I guess he'll be the second singles player. Maybe Krajinovic. I don't know. I'm curious to see who they choose for doubles and who they choose for singles there. Kind of a solid team. Obviously, you have to like Novak. But when you think about the matchups here, I would like a stronger maybe second player there. I mean, Krajinovic might be pretty strong. I'm curious to see if Canada can kind of mess things up a little bit. If Raonic or Shapovalov are able to shock Novak, that second singles match gets really, really sweaty for Serbia. Germany, I think, is kind of clearly the third team here. Not necessarily an overall talent, but just when you start to look at the composition here, I just don't think they have that second singles player to get it done. So Serbia is, pretty clearly the favorite here, and you see that in the markets. I wonder if Canada maybe has a little better chance than people have given them credit for. And not that I've entirely written off Germany, but I've mostly written them off. I've got them kind of third here. And Candace.
Yeah, I see Serbia winning this group. The core of their team obviously is the same from last year. If anything, I think they're a little better. I like Philip better than I think it was Troitsky last year. So I look to them. And there's a theory behind Serbia that I'll get to when we talk about our outrights too.
Yeah, theory.
Yeah.
Theory.
I like theories.
Interesting. This group has frustrated me a little bit trying to figure it all out. You look at Canada, and I look at Raonic, and I think Raonic should beat Struff and should beat Lajovic or Krajinovic. I just wish I knew if Shapovalov or Raonic, more so Shapovalov, would play doubles or not, or whether they would potentially step in if it was a 1-1 to play doubles. I just feel like because the 2 seeds play the first match, that Raonic is going to put Shapovalov, I would assume, in a situation where he's going to be facing Zverev and Novak with a 1-0 lead in the bank and can perhaps play with a little bit more freedom. I just don't know. I just don't want to get involved and feel like I've got a significant investment in Canada and then have Polanski and Diaz go out there and play a deciding doubles rubber. And that's where that basically sums up this whole tournament in a way. I think Shapovalov, he pushed Novak here last year. Novak has his blister that he's been talking about and, stopped him from playing half of his exhibition the other day. Zverev is gone from the flavor of the month this time a year ago to being basically a sour taste for a lot of people. It's tricky. Germany does have, solid doubles options there. But, I think it's the strength of that second singles player is going to be really key. And that's where I'm starting to think about Canada. But, that Polanski-Diaz, the depth really dropped off. I wish Felix was in there in some capacity to maybe just shore up that doubles a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd feel better about Serbia if I didn't think Novak needed maybe a little positive press here, and that winning the ATP Cup might be a nice way to distract from some other things going on in his life recently. But it's tough. This is a solid group. He should be clearly the favorite there. And Krujinovic, if he's playing well, or even Lajovic, frankly, is going to be competitive. Like you said, you've got all the doubles trouble.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's perhaps one to get involved with in particular matchups and in particular matches, or maybe play some doubles or parlays or multis or whatever you want to call it through just the singles, because the doubles is a bit of an unknown in some instances here.
That makes sense. Anything else, guys, on Group A?
No.
Happy to move on. Cool.
Which unfortunately looks like includes Canada twice. Do you want to jump into Group C, Steve, and maybe give you a second to clean up Group B there?
Let's do that.
Group C, and again, we'll go back to B in just a second. This is one of the groups that I think has some value here, simply because Austria is the betting favorite here in the markets. I think that's a lot of respect for team. But as you start to look at this from a strategic standpoint, you want two strong singles players. You have to play those two matches. And I don't know if Denis Novak is that guy. As you start to look at France, Monfils and Paire, Monfils has a chance to go out and play some of these better players, and he's just about as talented as anybody. He could really surprise anyone here. And Paire's the wild card. Obviously, we don't know if he's playing well, if he really cares. But what France really has here kind of in their back pocket in Mahut and Vasilin, a really nice doubles team. So they have a chance to have an advantage as long as they can get one of those singles wins. The doubles team could have a chance to be really impressive in this group. Candice, what do you see?
Well, I look at it similarly to you in that when I look at this, I see Austria as of the favorites in these four groups, that they're definitely the one that is the most vulnerable. But I found myself looking in a different direction. I'm intrigued by Italy in this field. Now, that's putting some faith in Fabio Fognini, which, I already said on this podcast that, look at me putting faith in Dimitrov. So we're just going all in. So I'm going all in, putting my faith in Fogs. At times, he is a player who has played well in team formats, and that's a real thing. There are players from certain countries, especially in Europe, that they play better in a team format. Maybe they have more motivation for their country or their teammates than they do themselves. But we obviously know the talents there. Berrettini's interesting. I'm surely not alone, think he's going to fall down the ranks a bit this year, but not yet. He's going to do fine here. He's been playing well, of course. And, they have a little bit of doubles prowess there with Bilali. So I think they're a serviceable team. I don't think that they're the best team, but this is a group that's winnable. And so I don't think the difference between France and Italy on talent is as large as the gap between them in the wagering would suggest.
Yeah, as I look now, it looks like Paire's going to end up playing Fognini there. That could be spectacular in every sense of the word.
I'm ready for it.
What do you see here, Steve?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty happy to go against Austria as well. And I don't know if it's just because in the back of my head, I think about Dominic Thiem and how he just basically didn't turn up to his match, I think, in the Western and Southern Open before the US Open. I think he lost to Krajinovic like 6-2, 6-2. I don't think he likes to play a lot of tennis, just not the week before Grand Slams. I think Denis Novak is vulnerable. If you had a more solid player there, then you could potentially make a case, considering Benoit Paire and Fabio Fognini are not solid and consistent. But I think I would lean to France just because of that doubles team. When you think about, Benoit Paire and Monfils, if you can get kind of a 50-50 result out of them and end up with Mahut and Roger Vasselin in the doubles, I think that's a pretty good position to be in. I wouldn't be too shocked to see Fognini play some of the doubles for Italy with Bolelli. I think they had some good success a couple of years ago, and Fognini gets the break between, so the two seeds play before the one, so he will get that kind of couple of hours between matches. So that might be something to keep an eye on. But if I had to pick, I'd probably just go towards France here over Italy.
Fabio. That's I need an Italian flag. Woo.
That's it. I mean, I like the point you made though, Candace. I mean, if Fabio's locked in here, he weirdly holds the key of being the guy that just smashes those kind of second level singles matches. And you just need Berrettini to get lucky against team, or the doubles team to get lucky against the Australian doubles team. But I think France weirdly has the best weapon here in that doubles team.
Yeah, I think there's just something about team tennis with Fognini though that kind of like sometimes just wakes him up a bit. And so we're riding it. We're riding the wave.
Team tennis or Dominic team tennis? Which one? I'm confused.
Not
now.
that.
So not
multiple people.
All right, Steve, are we ready to go back to Group B, which I think I noticed, and I hope I got this correct. Is that ironic? And Candace, I don't really know what ironic really means here, that I think Steve biffed on Australia.
He did. He missed his own team.
No, I missed on. Did I miss on Greece or was it Australia? It might have been Australia.
I think it was Australia.
Let's not go back and revisit. I put them up down the bottom because I'm sharing my screen as part of this thing, and I couldn't really do anything in the background. So anyway, it'll sound better on the podcast than it will on the live stream. So this is a really interesting group, and it kicks off on Tuesday night with Spain versus Australia. When you look at this, the Spanish team's pretty solid. My question mark here is, does Nadal play the doubles? Probably not, being so close to the Australian Open. He might maybe play one or two, if it's a real kind of do or die scenario. I do kind of wish, John Millman is very, very solid, but Nick Kyrgios playing the number 2 spot would have been amazing, I think, for this particular team, for the Australian team. I think it's out of those two just because of, Greece, the lack of depth there from a double standpoint and the second seed standpoint. That's a lot for Tsitsipas to overcome. Stefanos Tsitsipas, not his brother. So it's going to be tricky, but I think a lot of it will come down to, De Minaur will probably be facing Nadal with Australia 1-0 down, and I think that just adds a little bit of extra pressure. But it's going to be a tough ask, I think, to knock off Spain here.
It is pretty disappointing that Kyrgios isn't here. Do you have any idea, why he isn't participating? I guess he chose the other tournament and the points there. It seems like he would have been a really nice piece here, and would have been fun to see him play Nadal. Would have been fun to see him maybe play some of the other big players. And then De Minaur could have just been fantastic in the second matches. You can use Kyrgios in doubles. He'd be a really nice piece in this format.
Yeah, I think it was more so to do with, so the top 2 singles players in terms of rankings got in as a clear kind of starting point, which means so Millman ranked higher than Kyrgios, which would have put Kyrgios, so it's kind of along the similar lines of Felix and Khachanov, in that they all could have been kind of the third player. It would be pretty cruel for Millman, who played as like the third string player last year and only played one singles match, to then miss out again, even though his ranking was better. So I think they've made that decision to stick with obviously De Minaur and Millman, and then a lot of the third ranked singles players are then playing the other tournaments because there's the option this year there's more tennis on offer and more options for them to get involved.
Yeah, it makes sense, but unfortunately, it kind of puts us in a position where it's hard for me to see Spain not winning this group. What do you think, Candace? I mean, do you see any situation in which Greece really puts something magical together, or Australia does something kind of outrageous outside of Nadal kindly choosing to maybe not play?
No, I think that Spain is going to end up winning. They're a difficult team for me to get very excited about. Obviously, the core is still there, but I do think when you're talking doubles, and again, like Steve mentioned, not only with Australia coming up, but just at this stage of his career, we don't see Nadal play doubles in these types of tournaments much anymore like he used to. And I do think Feliciano Lopez, who was on the team last year, as old as he is, he still is a pretty serviceable doubles player and has been for a long time. So the swap out for Grenolier instead of him, I think, is noteworthy. And we'll get to that when we talk about outrights. But for this group, regardless, it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, Spain's a huge favorite here, and again, we've gone through. It's just tough to make a case for either Australia or Greece. I guess if I had to pick one, I'd pick Australia, but I just don't love their price.
I think if you had to pick one, I would suggest there's probably better value in picking De Minaur to beat Nadal at kind of $3.70 or whatever it is at the moment, plus 270, than I think to pick Australia to kind of progress out of this group.
That's a great point. I mean, it's almost impossible for Australia to win this group without that happening. And I think the market's got this price on Greece, right? They're plus 850 to win the group. Unless Stefanos Tsitsipas all of a sudden starts playing doubles and being amazing at it for some reason.
And winning both these singles matches.
Right. It's a whole situation. So, yeah, I like that. If you like Australia, attack just that single match. Let's jump into the last group here. Group D, Russia with Medvedev, Rublev, Karatsev, and Donskoy. So two strong singles players and, a doubles team, it looks like here. Although I imagine Med and Rublev might end up playing a little bit of doubles maybe. The Japanese team, Nishikori, Nishioka, McLaughlin, Ben McLaughlin, and Toshihide Matsui. The Argentinian team, Diego Schwartzman, Guido Pella, Horacio Zabalos, and Maximo Gonzalez. It's just another group where it's hard to pick apart and to find somebody outside of the favorite. Russia has such an advantage by having such a strong second singles player, as well as the option to put together maybe some interesting doubles teams here. What do you see, Candace?
Russia wins. Next.
How about you, Steve?
I'm happy to rule out Japan. I mean, Japan's only here because Nishikori is using his protected ranking. McLaughlin's a solid doubles player, but I don't see Nishikori beating Medvedev, and I don't see Nishioka beating Rublev. So, look, it makes it tough for Japan. I do feel like at some point, maybe in this group, in either of the matches, if one of Rublev or Medvedev loses, they might just, in case of emergency, break glass and put them in and play them as the doubles as a last resort. You can maybe make a case, if Diego Schwartzman could somehow pull off a miracle, the Argentinian doubles combination's pretty solid, but it's hard to, when you go through all the combinations, I don't see Andrei Rublev's a pretty good second singles player, and I think that is going to be the difference here.
Yeah, it really just puts them in a powerful position. He'd be honestly a good number one singles player. So just to have that kind of variability is great for Russia here, and that's why you see them as the clear favorites. So as we start to look at it, you have the winner of each group advance. It seems like we feel pretty good about Serbia. We feel pretty good about Spain. You look at the second group, we each took a different team there in France and Italy to beat Austria, and then in Group D, Russia. So you start to look at some of the outright prices overall. Russia's plus 200. Makes sense to me that they're the favorites, again, given their group and given kind of the overall team composition. Serbia, again, plus 300. Makes sense given that, I imagine Novak will probably do his best here, even though it is the week before the Australian Open. So that kind of leaves us with the other teams we picked here. France is 18-1 to win the whole kit and caboodle, and so is Italy. Can either one of you make a case for France or Italy there at 18-1? Or maybe do you like Russia or Serbia? Candace, I know you kind of teased a little bit that you had a bigger point here that you were getting to. So are you ready to lay it on us?
I'm ready. So it's ironic because you were talking about the tournaments and their names, and you were saying how they seem like golf courses. Well, you'll all learn a little about me. I was varsity golf captain for my team because I'm a dork and I did things like that. So I compare golf and tennis a lot because there are parallels between the two sports, of course. And of course, over in golf, we have Ryder Cup, and Ryder Cup is not too dissimilar to what we have here, both a team tournament. And there's one thing you'll notice if you watch the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup, whenever it's those years, is that Europe wins a lot because Americans don't care about team tournaments. And there's one thing that I've learned from all of that. I'm getting there. I know no Americans here, but it's that nationalism matters when you're talking about team tournaments. Not to get too political, but for some countries, playing for your country and representing your country is a really big deal. And it's a bigger deal for those nations than it is others. I just say that dealing with motivation, especially right before a major tournament, for some players from some countries, I think they're looking to the major tournament more so than for some others. Winning for your country is a really big deal. If you look to golf when they announced that they were able to compete in the Olympics, and you look at the guys who were really excited about that and the ones who weren't, it's a really good example of what countries it's important to play for your country in. It's just kind of a cultural thing. And it is something that I always take into consideration when we're talking about tournaments like this.
I like that. That's a great angle. How about
it's
you,
the Candace Hare nationalism theory. Don't want to get too political because people are mad at each other. End of.
Okay, we'll work on wordsmithing that a little bit. Maybe we can use a different word because nationalism is a little bit of taboo.
Yeah,
I was
it
doing
sounds
another
a little
podcast, and we decided to say something like Asia players who were quarantined in Asia. So we'll work on that. We'll find a different word to use.
It's hard because I don't want to say like patriotism either. That's kind of bad. So I need like a thesaurus.
Patriotism's less bad. That's the nicest form of nationalism.
Maybe.
No, wait. This is a tennis podcast. Damn it. I'm not going to get sucked into this. Steve, what do you see here? Any outright numbers stick out to you here? I mean, who are you picking to win the whole thinger?
Look, I have changed my mind a little bit today because I have written up this preview because this is going to be one of my previews that I put up on Betfair for the coming week. It's if you look at who I think will win, I think Russia's the logical one to look at. If you look at value in particular positions, I'd be more inclined to think along the way of, like I said before, with that Demonor position maybe against Spain, against Nadal is probably better than Australia versus Spain. Outside of that, I'd love to know how Shapovalov's playing or how he's feeling because a lot of Canada will come down to him. And again, the other one that's a big price and maybe just better to take in the group winning instead of the overall is France. I think group market wise, you could maybe make a case for France, but in an ATP Cup final, if I was sitting there on an 18-1 ticket with Gael Monfils and Benoit Paire playing singles with all of that on the line, I don't think I'd be able to watch.
I agree there. I think the group price is the way to go with France, but in a weird way, I think there might be more value on the Canada outright at 28-1 than Canada win their group at plus 250. If Canada's going to put this together and knock Serbia out, you start to look at their matchups there. Spain, they only need to win one of those singles matches. They should have a pretty solid advantage in doubles unless Nadal's, really focused and locked in there. You look at that Russia matchup, as long as they can split singles, that doubles match is going to be as tight as absolutely can be. And then again, you look at France, you look at Italy. I think that I'd frankly favor Canada probably over both of them. Again, given what they could put together. What do you think about that? I mean, Canada to take it all 28-1. Instead of to take the group at plus 250.
Yeah, I think that's an option. I mean, look, when you are going with that outright, you can obviously, they might win the group and you can then kind of find your position. Again, we don't know who's playing who in the semifinal, so it's hard to know. Like if they're on the other side to Russia, then you can maybe make a bit more of a case to kind of hold out maybe until the final. But it is, a lot of it is going to come down to kind of, as I said, there's so many variables here compared to just a player turning up and playing singles. It's, will they play twice? Who will, how will they handle each particular occasion? So it's, I think I tend to agree there that I think there is more value in that price for the winning outright for Canada.
Yeah, it's one of those, even at 28-1, I think even if they're on the rough side of the draw, it looks like somebody thinks they know. It looks like it's AD versus BC of the semis. So thank you, Jay Wall Mizzou. We kept looking into that. Not to doubt you, but what's your source? Because we tried to look for that.
No,
we couldn't find it.
I'm not saying we can trust him on that, which then kind of loses a bit of value there because Canada would then be facing Russia in that semi-final. So it does make, maybe it does release a little bit more value maybe on France, but it's going to be a tricky little spot.
Apparently, it's a sort of rule book I couldn't find. So now I feel real dumb, which means we're probably just about done, folks. Anything else from you guys here on the ATP Cup or any of these ATP tournaments before we wrap it for the day?
I don't think so.
I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see, like how Steve mentioned, some of the singles players playing twice. If you remember in the tournament last year, when it was Spain against Serbia, that it was Djokovic who ended up playing doubles, and that got them through there at the end of the day. It'll be interesting to see, because obviously we know Djokovic has the blisters going on, and if it did end up being Serbia against Spain, Serbia against Russia, something of that nature, we'll see what he would end up doing. It's a tricky thing, because Djokovic is somebody who, of course, he's looking ahead towards the Australian Open, but he is such a Serbia boy countryman. I could see him, of the big players, the big names, I would see him as being the most likely to go back and play twice if they were to make the final.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, folks, I think that just about does it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Whatever you're watching on, we'd love a thumbs up or a like or whatever the right button is. If you're using one of those clocks that is TikTok or whatever it is, do whatever that is. I don't know. Candace knows all this stuff. We should make her do this, frankly.
I've never made a TikTok. I want that to be clear. That's a badge of honor for me, but I know what it is.
Even that you just have an opinion is well beyond where I am. But again, we'd like whatever support you can give us. If you're watching, if you're listening, that would be really great. Reach out to us on Twitter at Eat Sleep Tennis. DM should be open there, and you can give us your thoughts and feelings on what you like, what you don't like, what else you might want us to do. We're easy, folks. And I think that's – go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think the other thing, so est.show, I think we are on Instagram. So we're looking to do some form of competition in the next couple of days in some capacity there. I know Alex is giving me a funny look because he also doesn't have an Instagram. We're also
sort of graham cracker delivery service.
So these shows at the moment are broadcast out on Periscope, onto Twitter, but also onto YouTube. So Periscope's finishing up in a couple of months, so we're not too sure what's going on there. So probably the best way to do that is, if you want to follow along live, is to subscribe to the Sleep Tennis Show on YouTube. And yeah, I think we're on all the standard podcast providers. So thanks for everyone who's given us feedback or liked or subscribed along the way. It's nice kind of feedback when you're starting up something new for, in any capacity. So thank you very, very much for that. And shall we finish up there, team?
That's all I've got. Thanks, everybody, and we'll be back soon.